She never chose to be his bride. He never believed in love. But when fate signed their names on the same page, destiny began to rewrite everything. Arranged marriages are just business deals, her mother said. Emotions only complicate things, he muttered as he signed the contract. But what neither of them knew was that behind cold signatures and silent vows, hearts were already burning. Subscribe now and dive into a romance where love isn't given, it's earned. Are you ready to feel every heartbeat? The rain tapped gently on the stained glass windows of the estate, as if hesitant to interrupt what was about to happen inside. Elena stood in front of the mirror, her reflection nothing but a ghost of the free-spirited girl she once was. The silk of her wedding dress clung to her body like chains. She wasn't marrying for love, she was marrying for duty. Her father's company was drowning, her mother was sick, and her younger brother needed the best doctors money could buy. And so the solution came wrapped in a contract. Marry the son of the wealthy, ruthless magnate, the infamous Alexander Van Doren. They said he had a heart colder than marble. They said he didn't believe in love, only in control. But she hadn't met him. Not truly. Not until today. Elena, they're waiting, her aunt whispered, placing a hand on her trembling shoulder. She nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat, and walked down the marble hallway like a lamb to slaughter. Alexander stood at the altar like a statue carved from steel. Tailored to perfection, his suit was black as midnight, his eyes colder still. He didn't look up when she walked in. Didn't flinch. Didn't care. The ceremony was brief. Hollow. Robotic. I do, he said like he was confirming a bank transaction. And she repeated the words, barely audible. I do. No kiss. No tenderness. Just silence and the scratching sound of pens signing their futures away. That night, Elena sat at the edge of the enormous bed in his penthouse. He hadn't even returned after the reception. It was past midnight. The air was too still, her dress too tight, her heart too loud. Suddenly the door opened. He walked in, his face unreadable. You can take the bedroom, he said without looking at her. I'll stay in the guest room. I don't believe in sharing space with strangers. And just like that he vanished into the dark hallway, leaving her alone, with a name that wasn't hers, a life she didn't choose, and a man she was legally bound to, but emotionally alien from. I didn't know if I had married a man, or a machine. But something in his eyes, when I dared to glance, told me the ice wasn't eternal. It was protecting something. Something that might one day burn. The silence of the penthouse was too loud. Elena sat in the center of the grand bedroom, untouched and cold like a showroom. The bed was king-sized, the sheets pristine, but it didn't feel like a place where love could grow. It felt like a contract, perfectly folded and ironed into cotton and marble. She had removed her wedding dress alone. No helping hands, no soft voices. Just the zipper echoing like a sigh across the room. Now, in a satin nightgown, she stared at the door he had vanished through. The guest room, as he called it. A husband who wouldn't share a bed. A stranger she had vowed forever to. In the other room, Alexander poured himself a glass of scotch. No ice. He never liked the sound. Too emotional, too alive. He wasn't sure why he felt strange. He had married her. Completed the deal. His father would be satisfied, the board reassured, and the Van Doren name safe from scandal. Elena was beautiful, yes, too beautiful, but that didn't matter. Beauty was fragile. He had learned that long ago. Still, her voice haunted him. Soft. Determined. Unafraid. Why didn't she cry? He muttered, leaning back against the leather chair. Why didn't she resist? Meanwhile, Elena walked toward the large glass window that overlooked the city. It was stunning at night, full of life, light, movement. Unlike the man she had married. She remembered his eyes. Gray like winter, stormy with secrets. She'd felt them brush against her soul when she walked down the aisle. And yet no warmth. No flicker of recognition. Just duty. But something in her refused to be small. I'm not just a paper bride, she whispered, fingers pressed against the glass. I'm still me. I have a heart. I have a name. Later that night, unable to sleep, she stepped out of the bedroom. The hallway was dim. The guest room door was closed, a faint glow beneath it. She hesitated, then knocked. No answer. She turned the knob. He was sitting at the edge of the bed, still in his dress shirt, sleeves rolled up, glass in hand. His gaze flickered to her, surprised but not angry. Elena. I couldn't sleep, she said honestly. I didn't want to feel like a prisoner. You're not. Aren't I? Silence. Then for the first time something shifted in his voice. You can ask me anything. I won't lie to you. She stepped into the room, barefoot on cold marble. Then tell me, why do you hate love so much? Alexander looked at her like she had just asked him to breathe underwater. His jaw tightened. Because love makes people foolish. And weakness gets punished. That night we didn't touch. We didn't even smile. But our hearts, though wounded, began to listen to each other. Not with words. But with silence. With breath. With the ache of what might someday be. The next morning, Elena awoke to an empty bed and sunlight piercing through the velvet curtains like an unwanted truth. The space beside her was cold, not just in temperature but in feeling. She sat up, brushing strands of dark hair from her face, and noticed something strange. A silver tray by the door. A single cup of coffee. But no sugar. A note lay beside it. In this house, silence is not punishment. It's survival. Her fingers trembled around the paper. Not from fear. From confusion. Alexander sat in his private study reviewing financials, contracts, mergers, anything but emotions. And yet, her question from the night before echoed relentlessly in his mind. Why do you hate love so much? He hadn't hated it at first. Once, love had seemed like a warm place. A hand to hold in the dark. A place to rest. Until it became a battlefield. Until it tore his mother apart. Until it turned his father into a stone-hearted tyrant who called weakness a liability. No. Love wasn't warmth. Love was fire that burned down legacies. And yet, her eyes last night, large, honest, unafraid, unsettled him. Elena didn't fit into his world. She didn't scheme. She didn't beg. She simply existed, genuinely, and that made her dangerous. Later that afternoon they crossed paths in the hallway. She wore a long ivory dress, simple but elegant. Her hair was tied back, her eyes sharp. You don't have to avoid me, she said quietly, stopping in front of him. I'm not avoiding you, he replied almost too quickly. Then why are we walking on eggshells? Alexander looked down at her. Because this isn't a love story, Elena. It's a contract. She stepped closer, defiant. Then why did you leave coffee by my door? He said nothing. But his silence screamed. That night a thunderstorm rolled in. Rain pounded against the glass. Lightning lit the sky like a prophecy. Elena couldn't sleep again. She wandered the halls and found herself outside the library. He pushed open the door and there he was. Fireplace lit. Whiskey in hand. Reading a book as if it were the only thing that could anchor him to this world. You don't sleep much, she said, stepping in. I don't dream. I do, she said, sitting across from him. I dream of a life where I married for love. He looked at her for a long moment, the fire casting gold into his eyes. I dream of a life where love didn't ruin everything. And for a single heartbeat they sat across from one another. Two damaged souls in a mansion built on silence. Warmed only by the fire between them and the truths they weren't yet ready to say aloud. The table could have seated 20. Tonight it seated 2. At opposite ends, like enemies negotiating a truce in a war neither of them declared. The chandelier above bathed them in soft gold, casting long shadows across the polished wood. Shadows of two strangers bound by name, not by heart. Elena's knife clinked against the porcelain. Her gaze flicked up to him, then back down to her plate. Saffron rice. A meal crafted by chefs who knew nothing about the couple they served. He hadn't said a word since she sat. Neither had she. And yet something pulsed beneath the silence, like static before a storm. Alexander sipped his wine with calculated calm. His eyes occasionally lifted to hers, only to retreat a second too soon. He didn't understand her. Couldn't predict her. She wasn't demanding or desperate. She didn't try to seduce or flatter him. She simply existed. And in doing so she disturbed the rules he had built his entire life around. Finally he spoke. Do you find this arrangement unbearable? Elena paused. I find silence more painful than honesty. He leaned back. Sometimes honesty is crueler than silence. Cruelty doesn't scare me, she replied. But apathy does. For the first time his mask cracked. He hadn't expected her to say that. The butler entered to pour more wine, but the air was so thick with tension he nearly spilled it. Alexander waved him off quickly, leaving them alone again. "Why are you really here, Elena?" he asked, voice low. "You mean in this house or in your life?" "Both." She set her fork down. "I'm here because I refuse to watch my family collapse. I'm here because I value lives more than pride. And maybe I thought that beneath your armor there was still a man." He studied her carefully. "And what if there isn't? Then I'll mourn what could have been. But I won't regret trying." His breath hitched. Just slightly. But enough for her to notice. Because the truth? No one had tried before. Not like this. Not gently. Not with eyes that saw beyond the marble exterior. He cleared his throat. "Tomorrow I'll be gone for most of the day. Meetings. You're free to do as you like. Explore. Escape. I'm not your prisoner, Alexander." "No," he said quietly, standing. "But I am." He left without another word. That night, Elena remained at the table long after he disappeared. The candles flickered low. Her plate had gone cold. But her thoughts burned like wildfire. This man was hiding something. Not arrogance. Not disdain. But grief. And it terrified him more than love ever could. We shared a meal but not a conversation. We sat at the same table but worlds apart. And yet I felt his silence more deeply than I ever felt anyone's words. The rain had softened into mist by morning. Elena wandered through the mansion alone, her fingers brushing along the antique wallpaper, her steps echoing faintly across marble and memory. The silence in that house wasn't emptiness, it was haunted. But not by ghosts. By something heavier. By love that had once tried to survive there. And failed. She turned a corner and stopped in front of a large double door she hadn't noticed before. The handles were ornate, aged with time. She hesitated, then pushed them open. Inside, time stood still. A grand hall stretched before her, walls covered from floor to ceiling in portraits. Dozens, maybe more. Oil paintings, black and white photographs, charcoal sketches. Men in suits. Women in pearls. Couples with eyes that refused to meet. But there was one that caught her breath. A woman. Young. Ethereal. Eyes that mirrored Alexander's. She stood before it, unable to look away. "You found her," a voice said behind her. Elena turned. He was there, no suit, no mask. Just a man. Barefoot. Shadowed by his own history. "Who is she?" Elena asked softly. He stepped closer, his voice low. "My mother." She looked at the woman again. There was something tragic in the eyes, even though the mouth smiled. "She was beautiful." "She was sad," he corrected. "My father didn't believe in love. Only alliances. Appearances. She tried to love him anyway. It destroyed her." Elena swallowed. "And you think that's what love does? Destroys?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked around the room at the silent witnesses staring down at them from gilded frames. "I build my life on logic. Control. Because when love enters the room, control disappears." Elena moved closer to him. "Maybe love doesn't destroy. Maybe it reveals." They stood in silence, the air heavy between them. Then he spoke again, quieter. "She used to come here when she couldn't sleep. Sit in this room and paint. My father hated it. Said feelings were weakness." He paused. "When she died, he had every painting removed from her studio and brought here. As a reminder." "A reminder of what?" "To never feel too much." Elena reached out and gently touched his arm. "I'm not your mother, Alexander." "I know. But I won't let you become your father either." His eyes snapped to hers. For a heartbeat they didn't speak. Their pain was speaking for them. In that quiet room, surrounded by the faces of the past, something shifted. Not with words. But with presence. She saw him, not the man he showed the world, but the boy left behind in those shadows. And for the first time he didn't turn away. That evening she found a single brush and canvas left by the library door. No note. Just a silent invitation. The canvas stared at her like a blank confession. Elena sat on the studio floor, barefoot, hair loose, surrounded by brushes, pigments, and silence. The scent of old wood and turpentine filled the air. It was the first time since arriving that she felt untouched, unwatched. Yet she knew he had left that canvas for her. Not as a gift. As a challenge. She dipped the brush into soft blue. Not because it was her favorite color but because it was his. The color of his eyes when they softened, when he forgot to be cold. Her first stroke was uncertain. Second braver. Soon her hand moved with purpose. She didn't paint a face nor a scene. She painted emotion. Fractures. Whispers. A landscape of everything she couldn't say aloud. She painted what it felt like to be married to a ghost, and yet still ache for his soul. Alexander passed the studio door 3 times before stopping. He told himself he wasn't curious. But the silence inside wasn't empty, it was alive. And it pulled at him. He opened the door quietly. And froze. Elena was on her knees, brush in hand, sleeves rolled up to her elbows. A smear of yellow on her cheek. Her gaze entirely focused as if the world had narrowed to canvas and memory. The painting was abstract. Beautiful. Raw. He didn't understand it. But he felt it. It made his chest ache. "You watched me," she said without turning around. "You left the door open," he replied. "That doesn't mean enter." He stepped closer, his voice low. "That painting, it's about me, isn't it?" She put down her brush. "No. It's about us." He took a deep breath. "And what do you see in us?" "Potential," she said without hesitation. "Pain. Resistance. Beauty. Fear. Silence." Then he whispered, "What about love?" Elena stood, meeting his eyes. "I don't paint lies." The moment was electric. No kiss. No touch. Just the nearness of truth. And in that moment, it became harder for him to hide behind walls that no longer protected him from her. Because Elena didn't try to destroy him. She tried to understand him. And that was far more dangerous. Later that night she found a folded piece of paper slid under her door. "You were right. Your painting said everything I couldn't." She pressed it to her chest, eyes closed. Maybe he wasn't made of marble after all. Maybe he was stone softened by rain. The mansion felt colder that evening. Even the chandeliers seemed to hold their breath, as if sensing the storm gathering behind locked doors. Elena's footsteps paused before a heavy oak door at the end of the west wing. A door she'd never seen open. Its dark surface bore no handle, only a polished brass keyhole that glinted in the dim light. Alexander appeared behind her, silent as a shadow. "That room has been closed for years," he said, voice low, almost hesitant. Her eyes met his, curious but steady. "Why?" she asked. He didn't answer immediately. Instead he retrieved an ornate key from his pocket, cold and heavy. "Because some doors are meant to stay shut," he whispered, turning the key with a deliberate click. The lock gave way with a sigh, and the door swung open to reveal a room frozen in time. Dust motes floated in the stale air, settling over forgotten furniture draped in white sheets. The walls were lined with photographs, some torn, some fading. A piano sat in the corner, its ivory keys yellowed but untouched. At the center stood a small desk cluttered with letters, a cracked locket, and a diary with a worn leather cover. Elena stepped inside, the silence pressing close. "What is this place?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "My past," Alexander replied, his eyes darkening. He gestured toward the diary. "She wrote in here every day, my mother. After my father locked her away in his cold world. She poured her soul into these pages, hoping someone would hear her." Elena opened the diary carefully. The handwriting was delicate but desperate. "Today I dreamt of freedom. But freedom is a ghost I can never catch. My love for Alexander is the only light in this prison." Her heart tightened. Alexander's voice broke the silence. "She never left this room alive. It's a tomb for memories I tried to bury." Elena looked up, eyes fierce. "Memories don't die. They live in us. And maybe it's time to face them." For the first time he let her hold the cracked locket. Inside was a faded photo of a young woman smiling at a child, Alexander. "I've kept this locked away," he admitted. "Afraid if I opened this door I'd lose myself. But what if opening it means finding yourself again?" He swallowed hard. The room felt less like a prison now. More like a beginning. Two souls stood amid shadows of the past, caught between pain and hope. The key had turned not just in the lock, but in their hearts. Could love unlock the doors he thought forever sealed? The house seemed alive that night. Every creak, every sigh of the old wood whispered secrets. Elena sat in the dim glow of the library, diary open on her lap, fingers trembling over the faded ink. The room beyond the locked door was no longer just a memory. It was a voice. A voice she could no longer ignore. The clock struck midnight as a soft knock echoed through the halls. Alexander stood there, eyes shadowed and tired. "Some doors," he said, "should remain closed." She looked up at him, a quiet defiance in her gaze. "But some truths demand to be heard." He moved closer, lowering his voice to a whisper. "I was a boy who promised to protect a secret. But secrets are cages." Her hand found his, warm and steady. "Then let's break those cages." Together they entered the room he had once feared. The air was thick with the scent of old paper and forgotten dreams. Elena traced the edges of the letters scattered on the desk. Her eyes caught one, folded neatly as if waiting. She unfolded it slowly. "My beloved Alexander. In this life of shadows, my love for you is the only light. Promise me you will never become the man who locks his heart away." Her breath caught. Alexander's voice broke through the silence. That was her last letter. Written the night before she vanished. Elena's eyes searched his face. "Vanished?" He nodded slowly. "Some say she left. Others say something darker happened." The shadows seemed to lean closer. Elena's heart pounded. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I was afraid. Afraid that the past would swallow us whole." She tightened her grip on his hand. "We can't live in fear. Behind every locked door, there are whispers waiting to be heard. Behind every silence, a story aching to be told." And in that room of shadows, they found the courage to face the truth together. The storm outside mirrored the turmoil inside. Raindrops pelted the windows like shattered promises, relentless and unforgiving. Elena stood by the fireplace, the flickering flames casting shadows across her face. A mask of resolve and fear. Alexander's footsteps echoed from the hall. He entered, drenched, eyes haunted. "We need to talk," he said, voice low, brittle. She met his gaze, steady but wary. "About what?" He hesitated. "About the promise I made. Years ago." A vow whispered in the dark. A promise that had bound him tighter than chains. "I swore never to love again," Alexander confessed. "To protect myself. From pain, from loss." Elena's heart clenched. "And yet here we are." He looked away, ashamed. "That promise, it's a ghost that follows me. Reminds me of her. My mother. How love took everything from her." She stepped closer. "But you're not her." His voice cracked. "Sometimes, I'm afraid I'll become the same man who locked away his heart. Afraid that by letting you in, I'll only bring you pain." Elena reached for his hand. "Love is not a promise to never be hurt. It's the courage to face the pain together." Suddenly, the sound of a door slamming echoed through the mansion. Both turned sharply. A figure disappeared down the staircase. Alexander's jaw tightened. Not everyone wants this secret to be revealed. Elena swallowed. "Then we need to be ready." Echoes of a broken promise haunted the halls. But amidst the shadows, a new vow was forged. One of trust, courage and an uncertain hope. The mansion's corridors whispered secrets under the cloak of night. Elena's heartbeat quickened as she moved silently, the soft padding of her footsteps swallowed by the thick Persian rugs. Shadows danced along the walls, flickering with the ghostly light of candles left burning in ornate sconces. She paused, sensing movement, a presence unseen but undeniably close. Alexander appeared behind her, his breath steady but eyes sharp. "I know you feel it too," he murmured. "Someone's watching." Elena nodded, eyes scanning the darkness. "Every night the silence breaks with footsteps, whispers I can't place." He reached for her hand, firm and grounding. "We're not alone." Their search led them deeper into the mansion's bowels, past rooms long forgotten. In the hallway, a faint light flickered beneath a door they'd never dared approach. Alexander's fingers brushed the cold brass doorknob. "This is where it begins," he said. Elena's hand trembled as she pushed the door open. Inside, the room was a shrine to the past. Photographs pinned to the walls, a collection of old letters and a large dust-covered mirror reflecting the flickering candlelight. On the floor lay a single worn-out shoe. Elena's breath caught. "Someone's been here recently." Alexander's eyes darkened. This isn't just a haunting of memories. It's a warning. A sudden noise, the creak of floorboards, snapped them both to attention. From the shadows emerged a figure, cloaked in darkness. Elena, Alexander said, voice tense. The stranger stepped forward. I'm here to protect the truth, the voice said, low but resolute. In the shadowed hallways, truths and lies collided. Every whisper carried weight, every shadow a secret. And in the heart of the darkness, the fight for love and survival began. The first light of morning spilled over the horizon like a whispered truth. A soft mist clung to the windows of the estate, and the house, so full of mystery, seemed to hold its breath, as if it too was waiting for what would come next. Elena stood on the terrace, wrapped in a linen robe, her eyes fixed on the sky that was slowly turning golden. She had not slept. How could she sleep after the night before? The revelation. The shadow. The voice of that stranger. And then, the note. Alexander appeared behind her, his hair disheveled, the dark circles under his eyes. But something in his gaze had changed. Less defensiveness. More truth. Elena, he began, but his voice faltered. She did not turn around. Tell me. He took a deep breath, as if each word that followed was a stone in his chest. It was my father, he said finally. He was the one who destroyed my mother. She turned slowly. Did you know? I suspected, but I always preferred silence to the pain of knowing for sure. And now, I need to tell you everything. They sat side by side, the world still as quiet as a confessional. My mother found out my father had another son, a child he hid, here, in this house, raised as a servant, invisible. When she threatened to tell, he locked her away. And then she disappeared. Elena squeezed his hand. And the son. Alexander looked into her eyes. He's the man we saw yesterday. The one who said he wanted to protect the truth. She was silent for a moment. Then she whispered. He's your brother. Alexander nodded. Half of who I am came from lies. But with you, Elena, I want to be whole. The sun rose slowly, and with it came the weight of confession. But also a liberation. Because there are loves that don't ask for perfection. They only ask for courage. And finally he had found hers. I love you, he said, not as a promise but as a surrender. She didn't respond right away. She just rested her head on his shoulder. And in that silence there was acceptance. And beginning. The house was no longer still. Whispers echoed in every corner, voices from the past clawing their way back into the present. Elena stood in the great hall, staring at the old family portrait that now seemed like a lie. A canvas of deception painted in secrecy. Alexander paced behind her, every step heavy with rage and sorrow. My father didn't just hide a child, he said, voice sharp. He destroyed lives to preserve his illusion of power. Elena turned. And now that illusion is falling apart. A door slammed in the east wing. Heavy footsteps. Urgency. It was him, Marcus. The hidden son. The brother born in silence. He entered the room, his face a mirror of Alexander's but hardened by years of being invisible. I warned you, Marcus said, voice cold. Some truths should never be set free. Alexander stepped forward. And some truths are worth burning down everything for. Marcus's eyes flicked to Elena. She doesn't know the full story, does she? Elena stiffened. What more is there? He smiled bitterly. My mother wasn't just a servant. She was the woman your father truly loved. But when it threatened his title, he erased us. Locked your mother away. Married for power. Not for love. Alexander's breath caught. You're lying. Marcus stepped closer. You think you were the chosen one? You were the mistake he had to make. I was the child of love. You were the child of duty. The silence was deafening. Elena whispered, and now? Marcus's eyes softened just for a second. Now, I want what was denied me. Recognition. Justice. A name. Alexander's jaw clenched. And revenge. I already took it, Marcus said, calm as ice. He dropped a folded letter on the table. Alexander opened it and froze. Elena looked over his shoulder. Her eyes widened. No, this can't be. Blood had bound them. Betrayal had shaped them. And now in the final hour, it would all come undone. You gave this to the press? Alexander asked, voice trembling. Marcus didn't flinch. The world deserves to know what he did. And so do you. Alexander looked at Elena, broken. This will ruin everything. She held his hand. Maybe it will free everything. The headlines hit like thunder. The heir's dirty bloodline. A legacy built on betrayal. 2 sons. 1 throne. No forgiveness. Paparazzi flooded the gates. Investors pulled out. The foundation of Alexander's empire crumbled in a matter of days. But the only thing he could think of was her. Elena. She stood in the solarium surrounded by ruined roses, petals scattered like promises cut too soon. When he approached, she didn't look at him. So it's all ashes now, she whispered. Yes, he said. And maybe it needed to burn. He stepped closer. I spent my life guarding a name. A cold, powerful name. And I lost myself in it. She turned eyes glassy. And now? I don't want the name, he said softly. I want truth. I want peace. I want you. Elena's lips trembled. You say that now, but what if the world never forgives you? He smiled, tired but free. Then let the world burn. She let out a breath, half a laugh, half a sob. God, you're stubborn. He took her hands. No. I'm in love. Outside, cameras flashed like lightning, vultures desperate for another piece of their story. Inside they stood in silence, a silence rich with understanding. And then she asked the one thing he feared. What about Marcus? Alexander closed his eyes. I gave him what he wanted. Our father's name. His share of the estate. And the truth. But can you ever forgive him? He paused. Maybe I don't need to. Maybe it's enough to stop fighting the past. The sound of footsteps echoed. Marcus appeared at the door, no longer angry, just tired. I didn't want to destroy you, he said. Alexander met his eyes. You didn't. You set me free. In the ashes of legacy they chose something greater. Truth, redemption, love. And when the world watched for flames, what they found was light. Months later the mansion was sold. The press moved on. The silence returned. Elena and Alexander opened a quiet bookstore by the coast, where stories were born not of scandal, but of soul. And one evening as the sun melted into the sea, he looked at her and whispered. Everything I lost led me to you. Years passed quietly. No more headlines. No more secrets clawing through the walls. The bookstore by the sea became their sanctuary, shelves of forgotten love stories, second chances and dog-eared poetry. Years passed quietly. No more headlines. No more secrets clawing through the walls. The bookstore by the sea became their sanctuary, shelves of forgotten love stories, second chances and dog-eared poetry. Elena often sat by the window writing letters she never sent. To the woman she used to be. To the girl who once believed freedom could only come through escape. She learned instead that freedom sometimes comes through belonging. Alexander no longer wore suits or masks. His hands grew used to ink, to dust, to building something that didn't require power to matter. Each morning he brought her tea. Each evening they read in silence. And in between they healed. One night, under a sky scattered with stars, they buried a small box behind the shop. Inside, a photograph of the mansion. A copy of the scandal article. And the letter Marcus had once left on the table. Elena looked at Alexander and he whispered, "Let this be the last thing we bury." She nodded. And just like that, the past was laid to rest. Not all fairy tales end in castles. Some end in quiet bookstores, in teacups, in soft hands reaching for each other across a lifetime. Some loves don't roar. They hum endlessly. And that's what Elena and Alexander became. A hum in the world, steady, true, eternal. Love isn't born in perfection. It rises from what we survive. From what we choose, again and again. If this story touched your heart, like the video, subscribe to the channel. Vidas inesquisivus and activate the bell so you don't miss the next chapters of love. Because here each story is written with soul. And lived with the heart. Leave a comment. Do you believe that love can rise from the ashes?